Mommy, Clara called. I'm ready for bed now. I've got my pajamas on and I even tucked myself in just like a big girl. Mary stood in the doorway to the bedroom, staring at the 6-year-old carbon copy of herself. The long lean frame, the big smile, and the long curly blonde hair, they were all hers. But those eyes, big and blue, they were her father's. Elijah, Mary thought, I miss you so much. I wish you were still here with us. Mommy, will you tell me a story, like Daddy used to? Mary wiped her eyes and crawled into bed with her daughter. Of course I will, sweetheart. Is there a story that you'd like to hear? Clara's eyes lit up. I know exactly which story I want to hear. I wrote this as the opening to my first novel before I went to college. I always looked at the characters in this book as personified parts of me. But we're more than just how we view ourselves. We are the characters in other people's stories as well. And only by hearing those stories can we really know a person. I was fortunate enough to touch other people's lives in ways that I didn't know. My friends and family each share with me a different part of who I am, and I'd like to share a little bit of that with you today. To the people who knew me, I loved a good story, I lived a life of responsibility, and I loved being a dad. Before we say goodnight to the life I lived, I'd like to tell you one more story. We'll call it my bedtime story. When I was young, my mom used to pull me up into a rocking chair and tell me the story of a pokey little puppy. After a while, as she turned the pages, I began to read along. My mom thought I was a genius. Not even 2 and I could read. Of course I couldn't really. We just read the story so many times that I'd memorized it. My love of reading would eventually turn into a love of writing too, and I began writing songs and later novels. My love of reading also led me back to college. I was sitting at work on break reading a book, and when the bell rang, I thought, if only I could get paid to read. The stories that I read and wrote may have been fiction and fantasy, but my life was real, and so was my dedication to responsibility. I started working when I was 6. The thing was, I wanted a Game Gear. It was the first color handheld video game system, and it was very expensive. So my dad told me if I wanted it, I had to earn it. He got me a job as a gopher and janitor at his office, and I earned the Game Gear. When I turned 18, I got a job at a major electronics retailer. I worked very hard, and I never missed a day, and by the time I was 19, I'd been promoted to store manager. I made good money, and I loved what I did, but I was working 80+ hours a week. When I found out that I was going to have a daughter, I knew that I couldn't live up to the responsibility of being her dad if I was working that much. So I quit and moved on to the biggest responsibility and the biggest joy of my life. One of my mom's favorite stories about me and the kids was the night that I turned life into a musical. We just watched a Disney story, and my daughter commented that she wished that life could be like that. And I said, well, why can't it be? So we spent the rest of the evening spontaneously breaking into song as we were doing things or having conversations. My son thought we were crazy, but eventually even he learned to jump in. My daughter Alex is beautiful and silly as they come. She shares with me a love of creativity and reading and learning. And my son, Logan, a handsome young version of me, he shares with me some of my struggles, social awkwardness and anxiety and bipolar, but he also shares a constant striving to improve and succeed, and I know he will. From making a story out of everything, to taking up work at a young age and the zaniness and love that I showed as a father, my life was my own, but it also belonged to the people whose stories I was in with them. The story I was telling about Mary and Clara, it was never finished. The same could be said about the story of my life, that much was left to be written. But all good stories go on beyond the turn of the final page. My life goes on through Alex and Logan, and all of you who let me be in your story. To you all, I hope yours ends with, and they lived happily ever after.